I was 28 when my father called me into his office and told me I needed to start mentoring my younger brother. That was the exact word he used, mentoring, like I was some scoutmaster or camp counselor, and not because Tyler asked for my help or because he showed any interest in learning. No, it was because my dad had decided it was time for Tyler to step into my shoes. Just like that, I sat there, stunned, staring across the mahogany desk at the man who had built our family business from scratch and who, until recently, I genuinely believed respected the years I'd poured into making it what it was today. And yet, somehow, in his mind, Tyler was ready to slide into my role because what? He shared our last name? I should back up. My name's Nate. I'm the eldest of three. Tyler's 5 years younger than me, and our sister Abby is a couple of years older than him. Our parents ran a medium-sized logistics company, warehousing, shipping, inventory management, the works. My dad, Carl, started it in his 20s after leaving the military, and over the years he grew it into a stable, if not glamorous, operation with decent regional contracts and about 60 employees. He always preached discipline, loyalty, and earning your place. At least, that's what he said when it was me he was talking to. I started working in the warehouse when I was 16, doing summer shifts between high school semesters, sweating in the July heat, unloading pallets, checking off inventory sheets by hand. I worked my way up through college, taking on more responsibility, learning the software, streamlining systems, catching mistakes others missed. By the time I graduated with a degree in supply chain management, I already knew the business inside and out. Dad offered me a full-time position, operations manager, and from there, I slowly became the person people went to when something needed to be fixed or organized or saved. My dad still had the final say, of course, but I was the one quietly holding the whole thing together. Tyler, on the other hand, never really showed up. He coasted through high school, spent 2 years bouncing between college majors, then dropped out to figure things out, which apparently meant playing Call of Duty until 3 a.m. and napping through the day while my parents called it a phase. He was charming, sure, and always had some new idea, an app concept, a startup, a YouTube channel, but he never stuck with anything long enough for it to grow. He tried working at the company twice, and both times quit within a month. Too boring. Too early. Too many rules. It was never his fault. Still, I tried not to judge him too harshly. Not everyone's wired the same way, and I didn't expect him to take over the company. That was never the plan, or so I thought. I figured if he ever got serious, he could carve out a niche for himself in marketing or sales or something. But not my role. Not the operations backbone of the company. Not the one that took me a decade to earn. So when Dad called me in that Monday morning and dropped the news, calm as you please, that Tyler was going to be shadowing me full-time for the next 3 months so I could prepare him to take over someday, I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke. I waited for the punchline. He didn't laugh. It's time to start thinking about succession, he said, tapping a folder on his desk like he was talking about an HR handover, not shoving me aside. You've done great work, Nate, but we need to future-proof the business, and Tyler needs to learn from the best. I tried to keep my voice even. And when did Tyler say he wanted to do this? Dad gave me that look, chin raised slightly, like I was being difficult. We talked about it last week. He's ready to commit. He just needs guidance. Structure. That's where you come in. I was quiet for a moment. You want me to train someone who's never shown up, never put in the work, never earned any of this, so he can replace me? My dad frowned. Don't be dramatic. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about family. You're still going to be here. You'll just shift your focus to broader oversight while Tyler gets his hands dirty. I stared at him. So, I move aside, and he gets my job title, my responsibilities, the systems I built. You'll collaborate. I stood up. This is a mistake. Nate, he said, voice hardening. Don't make this into a personal thing. He's your brother. He looks up to you. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What was the point? I walked out of the office and didn't say a word the rest of the day. My brain was buzzing, half with anger, half with disbelief. It wasn't just the slap in the face of being sidelined. It was that all my years of loyalty and hard work could be so easily swept aside in favor of bloodline politics. It felt medieval, like I was just a placeholder until the golden child deigned to take the throne. The next day, Tyler showed up in the warehouse wearing designer sneakers and no clue what to do. He grinned when he saw me, like this was just some fun new game. Guess we're co-workers now. he said, slapping me on the back. I wanted to throw a clipboard at his head. Instead, I forced a smile and gave him the most basic task I could think of: shadow one of the inventory guys and try not to get in the way. He lasted 2 hours before disappearing. I found him in the break room later, scrolling through his phone. "Don't you want to know how the receiving system works?" I asked. He shrugged. "I mean, yeah, eventually. But this is just like phase 1, right? Get the vibes down." I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. Things didn't get better over the next few days. Tyler would show up late, wander around asking dumb questions, try to change procedures he didn't understand, and then vanish halfway through the afternoon. At one point, he told one of our forklift drivers that he was going to revolutionize the workflow. The guy laughed in his face. And through it all, Dad defended him. "Give him time," he said. "You were new once too." "No, I was working when I was new," I shot back. I didn't treat it like a game. Dad's expression turned cold. "You're starting to sound bitter, Nate." That word stuck with me. Bitter. As if I was being petty instead of reacting to a blatant slap in the face. As if I was supposed to smile while they handed over everything I'd built to someone who treated it like a summer internship. But the moment that really broke something inside me came a week later, during a client call. It was a quarterly review with one of our oldest partners, a shipping company we'd worked with for years. I'd prepared the reports, scheduled the call, and set everything up. Tyler decided he wanted to sit in, which I didn't love, but fine. Maybe he'd learn something. Halfway through the call, he interrupted me mid-sentence to pitch an idea he'd come up with 5 minutes before. Something about gamifying inventory tracking with a point system. The client went silent. I tried to salvage the moment, but the damage was done. After the call, I pulled him aside. "You don't pitch half-baked nonsense to our longest-standing client during a performance review," I said. He grinned. "Relax. Just tossing out ideas. That's how innovation happens." I was shaking. This isn't a hackathon. This is someone's livelihood. Tyler rolled his eyes. "You really take this stuff seriously, huh?" That night, I went home and stared at my ceiling for hours. I kept hearing Dad's voice. "The door is always open." Like it was a favor. Like I should be grateful to stay. But what if I wasn't? What if I walked through that open door and didn't look back? What would happen then? Because if they thought this place ran itself, they were in for a rude awakening. And I was done being the safety net. Done cleaning up behind Tyler. Done waiting for the respect I had already earned 10 times over. The next morning, I made a decision. But before I tell you what I did, I need to explain just how far things went, how badly they pushed me before I finally snapped. Because it didn't stop there. Not even close. And I want you to understand why I did what I did next. So let me back up a little. I didn't walk out the next day. Not yet. I thought about it. Every hour, actually. But something in me still held out hope that maybe my dad would realize he'd made a mistake, or at least come to his senses before things got worse. I was wrong. That week, Tyler was officially added to the internal company email as Junior Operations Lead. Junior. Lead. It was an insult and a joke wrapped into one ridiculous title. When I saw it in the signature of a company-wide email he sent out, announcing that he was excited to revolutionize our operational protocols, I physically recoiled. Not only was he being handed a title he hadn't earned, but now he had the nerve to parade it like he'd won a trophy for breathing. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so damaging. Clients started asking questions. Employees came to me in private, confused. One of the forklift operators, Jim, a guy who'd been there since before I graduated college, actually pulled me aside and asked, "Is he really in charge now?" The look in his eyes, that concern, that quiet loss of faith, hit me harder than I expected. I told him, "No, I'm still here." But even I didn't believe it when I said it. Tyler, for his part, leaned into the role with the confidence of someone who didn't know what he didn't know. He started showing up to meetings I was supposed to lead, giving out tasks without context, interrupting me to ask surface-level questions, then hijacking the conversation with buzzwords he picked up off some business podcast. Synergy, agile logistics, cutting-edge adaptability. I don't think he even knew what half of them meant. But what really cracked the foundation was a Friday morning staff meeting. It started off normally. I was walking the team through a pending systems upgrade, new tracking software we'd been evaluating for months. I had spreadsheets, pricing options, and vendor quotes ready. We'd finally narrowed it down to 2 platforms, and I was presenting the pros and cons of each. Right in the middle of my presentation, Tyler leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Honestly, I don't think we need new software. I think we need new people who actually use the current one properly." There was silence. Actual silence. I looked at him slowly. "Excuse me." He shrugged. "Just saying. Maybe instead of spending thousands on new software, we should train the people who don't understand the tools we already have. No offense, but it seems like some folks are stuck in 2012. I could feel the blood drain from my face. He was insulting my team. The people who had stayed late with me during inventory overhauls, who had followed every broken barcode trail and patched every vendor mistake. The same team that covered for him when he disappeared at noon the day before. And worse, he did it in front of everyone. Before I could say a word, my dad, who had joined the meeting late and was sitting in the corner, chimed in. "There's some truth to what Tyler's saying," he said. "Calm, casual, like we were discussing the weather. Let's not be defensive, Nate. We should be open to new ideas." New ideas? Tyler's only new idea was throwing people under the bus and calling it innovation. After the meeting, I confronted my dad in his office. "You just let him undermine me in front of the team." Dad closed his laptop. "You need to learn to take feedback, son, from him. He sees things differently. Maybe that's what we need." I stared at him. "You think he's the future of this company?" He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I went home that night and barely spoke. I sat in my car for 10 minutes in the driveway, just gripping the steering wheel. My thoughts were racing, but underneath all the anger was something else, something I didn't want to admit. Grief. I was grieving the company I believed in, the father I thought respected me, the idea that hard work was rewarded. It was like realizing someone you trusted had never actually seen you for who you were. They just saw what they wanted to see. The following Monday, the real blow came. My dad called a strategic realignment meeting, just me, him, and Tyler. That phrase alone made my skin crawl. I walked into the conference room, and Tyler was already seated, feet up on the chair beside him, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for brunch to be served. Dad gestured for me to sit. "We've been talking," he began, "and we think it's time you took a step back from day-to-day operations." My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "You've been spread thin. You handle too much. It's not sustainable. Tyler's going to start managing the warehouse side. You'll shift to more high-level strategy. Big picture stuff." "That is my job," I said quietly. "You're carving it up and handing him the rest." Dad leaned forward. "We need to prepare for the next phase. He's ready to lead." I looked at Tyler, who winked at me. That's when I snapped. "Lead what exactly?" I said, standing. "You mean waltz in after 10 years of me cleaning up every mess this company's faced, play boss for 2 weeks, and take credit for work he didn't do? That's leadership." "Nate," Dad began, but I cut him off. "You want to give him a title? Fine. You want to hand him the keys? Sure. But don't expect me to train him like some assistant. I don't mentor lazy. I don't reward entitlement." Dad's voice was ice. "Watch your tone." I looked him straight in the eye. "Watch your judgment." Then I left. I didn't quit. Not yet. But from that moment on, I stopped giving a damn. For the next 2 weeks, I let Tyler run things. I stopped correcting his mistakes. I stopped reminding him about deadlines, or chasing vendors when he forgot to follow up, or warning him about common client quirks. I let the chips fall. And boy, did they. 2 shipments were late. One vendor nearly canceled a contract due to botched communication. Our warehouse team started making more errors, not out of malice, just confusion from Tyler's conflicting orders and half-baked efficiency hacks. Still, my dad wouldn't budge. Every mistake was met with, "He's learning," or "It's just part of the process." It all came to a head during a quarterly review with one of our biggest clients, Franklin and Brooks. They're an apparel company with multiple warehouses and a high volume of seasonal inventory. They've been with us for 7 years. Loyal. High maintenance, but loyal. Tyler offered to lead the call. Dad thought it was a good idea, a chance to show leadership. I stayed quiet. The call was a disaster. Tyler fumbled every metric. He didn't have the updated numbers, hadn't reviewed the Q2 trends, and misquoted our capacity. Worse, when the client asked about an urgent backorder issue, he stammered something vague about supply chain turbulence, and then, God help me, blamed the client's own input errors. I watched the client's rep go from confused to offended in under a minute. I jumped in to patch things up, but the damage was done. The client ended the call early, saying we'd need to follow up with someone more familiar with the account. Afterward, Tyler was all smiles. Not bad, right? Bit rocky, but I think they liked my tone. I didn't respond. Later that day, my dad pulled me aside. You undermined him. What? You stepped in during the call. That makes him look weak. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He is weak. And if I hadn't stepped in, we'd have lost them. Dad crossed his arms. You're being petty, Nate. I expected more. That was it. The breaking point. All the years. All the sweat. The long nights. The loyalty. It had all been reduced to me being petty. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a cold clarity. You told me the door was always open, I said quietly. Dad blinked. What does that mean? I just nodded. You want your golden boy to run the show? Then let him. Let's see how long he lasts when I'm not there to catch him. But even that wasn't the final betrayal. No, the final twist came 2 days later, when I opened the internal payroll dashboard by habit and noticed something strange. My bonus, my earned quarterly bonus, was missing. I checked again. Nothing. Just a note under my name. Deferred pending role review. I sat there in silence. Then I scrolled to Tyler's profile. He had a bonus. Higher than mine. That was the moment something inside me broke. And that's where everything changed. Because if they wanted to play games, they had no idea just how dangerous it was to burn the bridge while I was still standing on it. But I'll tell you what I did next in a moment. First, I want you to see exactly how it all fell apart. Because after that betrayal, I didn't just leave. I made sure they remembered what it cost to push me out. And trust me, they felt it. You'd think I would have stormed out that day, slammed the door, thrown my access badge on my dad's desk, made a dramatic exit with the whole office watching. I didn't. I walked out of that building like it was any other Tuesday. Calm. Quiet. I even smiled at the front desk receptionist on the way out. Because deep down, I knew I wasn't just leaving a job. I was walking away from a rigged game, one I'd been tricked into playing for years. But don't get it twisted, I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow. I spent the next 3 days in a daze, barely eating, barely sleeping. I'd sit on the edge of my bed with my phone in one hand, staring at old spreadsheets and client contact lists I no longer had a reason to open. I kept replaying conversations in my head. Every comment my dad made that I'd shrugged off. Every time I covered for Tyler thinking it was the right thing. Every little betrayal I missed while I was too busy proving myself to a man who'd already made up his mind. I didn't tell anyone what happened at first. Not even my friends. Abby, my sister, texted me asking why I hadn't shown up at work, but I ignored it. She worked in marketing for another company across town and had always stayed neutral in family stuff. I didn't know whose side she was on. Maybe she didn't even know there were sides. But after day 4, I couldn't sit in that silence anymore. I needed to move. Do something. Anything. So I went for a walk. Just around the block. No music. No destination. Just air. And that's when it happened. I bumped into Sean. Sean was a vendor rep I used to work with, small inventory tech firm we used for a while before we switched providers. He was sharp, detail-oriented, and one of the few vendor reps I actually liked dealing with. We hadn't talked in almost a year. Nate, he said, man, you look like you saw a ghost. I laughed. I probably am a ghost now. He gave me a look. You good? I hesitated for a second, then told him the truth. All of it. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't know him anything. Maybe because I just needed to get it out. We ended up standing on the corner for almost 20 minutes, just talking. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to spin it. Just listened. And then he said something I didn't expect. You ever think of going solo? I blinked. What do you mean? Consulting. Systems optimization. You've got the chops. I remember how you ran that facility. You saved our butt twice in 1 quarter. I shrugged. Yeah, but You're just free now, he cut in. No politics. No nepotism. You know how rare that is. I didn't say anything. Not because I disagreed, but because, for the first time in days, I saw a door that hadn't been slammed in my face. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, opened a new doc, and titled it, Nate Winters, Logistics Optimization Consulting. It was just a draft, an outline, bullet points, but it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. The next morning, I bought a domain name, threw together a simple website, basic stuff, who I was, what I offered, case studies from my time at the company, carefully worded, no names mentioned, and a contact form. I set up a business email, a LinkedIn update, and made a spreadsheet of potential clients, Smaller operations I remembered from trade shows, cold leads we never converted, vendors I'd dealt with who might still remember me. It was slow. The first week, nothing. I kept checking the inbox like some desperate teenager waiting for a text back. But I told myself, stay patient. On day 9, I got a ping. Subject, potential collaboration opportunity. It was from a guy named Lenny, operations manager at a mid-sized furniture distributor I'd met at a conference 3 years ago. We'd talked shop over drinks once and swapped cards. I barely remembered him, but he remembered me. We're growing fast, his email read, and our current inventory system is falling apart. I saw your update on LinkedIn. You free for a call? I stared at the screen, then smiled. Just a little. We set up a Zoom call that Friday. I wore a decent shirt, combed my hair, even printed out a few notes like I used to before board meetings. When the call started, Lenny looked frazzled. Papers everywhere, phone buzzing every few minutes. I'm losing my mind over here, he said. Our warehouse in Ohio just lost track of 2,000 SKUs. We've got returns backing up in Michigan, and I swear our system still thinks we're running Windows XP. I chuckled. You're not alone. Most growing companies hit that wall eventually. He leaned in. So what would you do? I walked him through it, step by step. Mapping workflows, identifying choke points, assessing upgrade paths that didn't require burning the whole system down. I kept it simple, clear, actionable. By the end of the call, he exhaled. Man, you speak my language. 3 days later, I had my first client. 1-month contract. Modest pay, but enough to prove I wasn't crazy. And just like that, I was back in the game. Over the next 6 weeks, I kept building. 1 client turned into 2, then 3. Word of mouth spread. I didn't have a huge roster, but I didn't need one. I wasn't chasing volume. I was targeting the sweet spot. Companies that were too small for full-time ops experts, but too big to keep winging it. I worked from my apartment. My schedule was my own. I made coffee at noon and wore hoodies to client calls. And I was happy. But the best part? No one could take it away from me. No dad breathing down my neck. No brother rewriting my job description. No fake titles or realignment meetings. Just me. My skills. My value. And as I rebuilt, I started hearing whispers. One of my former coworkers messaged me on LinkedIn. You doing okay? Heard things are getting messy over there. I replied casually. All good on my end. Why? What's going on? He sent a message back. Tyler tried to implement some new agile structure in the warehouse. No one understands it. Half the team's thinking about quitting. I didn't respond. Just stared at the message for a while, then went back to work. But it kept happening. Another text from an old vendor. Weird question. Is there a reason your brother keeps calling me about RFID upgrades he doesn't understand? And then, an email from an old client. We were hoping to speak with you about a potential contract, but your brother said you weren't with the company anymore. Any chance you're available for private consulting? Private consulting. That's when it clicked. Tyler had tried to replace me. My dad had let him. But neither of them had thought this far ahead. They didn't realize I was the business's brain. And now I was out here, building something better, smarter, cleaner. I didn't need to tear them down. They were doing that just fine on their own. All I had to do was keep rising. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't watching. Waiting. Because I knew it was coming, the collapse. The moment they'd realize what they'd lost. And when it came, I wasn't going to gloat. I was going to smile. Quietly. Like I always had. Because revenge doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes, it just needs you to leave. But don't worry. I haven't told you the best part yet. Because the moment everything really fell apart for them, that's still coming. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened next. I never planned to get revenge. Not at first. When I left, I didn't storm out swearing to burn the place down. I just walked away, wounded but done. I had no grand plan to bring the company to its knees or to make Tyler pay. All I wanted was distance, freedom, a clean break. But sometimes, revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from clarity. And once I saw things clearly, once I realized what they took from me and how fragile their house of cards really was, I stopped trying to be the bigger person. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted to remind them who they pushed out. It started with a wedding invitation. 6 weeks after I landed my 4th client, I got a pale blue envelope in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a thick cardstock invitation to an engagement party. Tyler and some girl I'd never met, Brielle. Apparently, he'd gotten engaged. Apparently, the family had known for a while. I hadn't been told. The invitation was addressed, Nathaniel Winters and guest. Real formal, real neutral, as if I hadn't spent the last decade making sacrifices for that family, as if I was just another distant relative they were obligated to invite. I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting wasn't Tyler's. It was my mother's. I texted Abby. "Did you know Tyler's getting married?" She replied almost instantly. "Yeah, it's been chaos. Brielle's dad is loaded. Whole thing's turning into a circus." I waited a minute. "You going?" "I kind of have to. Mom's been guilt-tripping me. You know how it is." "Yeah, I did." But that text from Abby? It unlocked something I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. Because if Brielle's dad was loaded, and this wedding was a circus, then the cracks were about to get a whole lot wider. I asked Abby to coffee. We met up at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. She looked tired, like she'd been stuck between everyone for weeks. I got straight to the point. "So, how bad is it?" She raised an eyebrow. "You mean the wedding planning or the business?" "Both." She sighed. "Tyler's spiraling. He's hiring people we can't afford, making decisions without consulting Dad. Morale's tanking. I heard 2 more managers quit last week. One of them told HR he couldn't take orders from someone who thought Wi-Fi was a shipping code." I almost choked on my coffee. She went on. "And Mom's in full damage control mode. She's trying to make this wedding a power move. Like if everything looks perfect, people won't ask questions." I leaned in. "What about Brielle's family? They're old money. Country club types. Her dad owns a chain of hotels. He thinks Tyler's some brilliant young executive." She rolled her eyes. "Which is why Mom's pretending everything at the company is fine." I sat back. Let it all soak in. Then I smiled. Not big. Not dramatic. Just a quiet smile. Because I finally saw the pressure point. They'd built a lie. A glittering, over-polished lie. Tyler was the golden child, the heir to the throne, the genius businessman marrying into wealth. And that illusion depended on one thing: no one looking too closely. If I wanted revenge, I didn't need to sabotage anything. I just needed to nudge. Let gravity do the rest. But I wasn't going to go in blind. I started digging. Quietly. I didn't have access to internal files anymore, but I didn't need them. I had contacts. People who trusted me. Warehouse leads. Former vendors. Clients who'd left quietly, annoyed but polite. I reached out under the guise of checking in, consulting, referrals, market research. What I found confirmed everything Abby said. Tyler had been restructuring the company on paper, moving departments under different names to make the org chart look impressive. He'd convinced my dad to sign off on flashy modernization projects, a new cloud platform that no one knew how to use, an outsourced customer service team in another time zone. Even talks of moving warehouse space to a more prestigious zip code for optics. Meanwhile, client complaints were piling up. Missed shipments. Mishandled returns. Bad data. He'd lost 2 regional contracts already, quietly, but not quietly enough. And yet, the image remained intact. Online, the company still looked solid. The website was slick. Tyler was posting motivational LinkedIn updates with buzzwords like legacy, innovation, and family first. It was all smoke and mirrors. And the wedding? The wedding was the grand stage. I learned through Abby that Brielle's father, Charles Renner, was planning to invest in the company after the honeymoon. A strategic partnership, she said. But the deal wasn't signed yet. Renner wanted to see a final quarterly report. Proof that the company was stable. He was due to visit the week before the wedding. That's when I knew this was my window, and I wasn't going to waste it. First, I made a list of every vendor and client I knew had been burned by Tyler in the past 3 months. Then I cross-referenced it with contacts who had reached out to me for consulting or had expressed frustration with the company after I left. I sent out polite, professional emails. Nothing inflammatory. Just this. "Hi. I hope this finds you well. I understand there may have been recent changes at Winters Logistics. I'm currently offering transitional support for clients navigating supply chain disruptions and operational restructuring. If you or anyone in your network could benefit from a stability audit or systems review, I'd be happy to chat." Neutral, helpful, innocent. But the timing? Devastating. Over the next 2 weeks, I booked 6 exploratory calls. Turned into contracts. One of them, a medium-sized client Tyler had just pitched to, emailed me directly. "Thank you for reaching out. Honestly, we were having second thoughts about working with your brother's team. Let's talk." That one made me pause, because I hadn't mentioned Tyler in my email. People were starting to talk. I also quietly updated my website with a new service, Vendor Transition Advisory, aimed at helping businesses smoothly disengage from underperforming logistics partners and restructure their supply chain. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. The ripple had started, but I wasn't done. I needed someone inside. Someone close enough to the chaos to confirm what I suspected, but not so close they'd be scared to talk. And that's when I remembered Carla. Carla had been my assistant for 2 years. Smart, organized, fiercely loyal. She left the company 3 weeks after I did. No announcement, no fanfare. I heard from a former coworker that she'd gone back to school part-time. I reached out. We met at a cafe far from town. She wore glasses now. Said she'd been doing online courses in data analytics. I bought her coffee and asked her, straight up, how bad is it in there? She laughed. A bitter, tired laugh. Then she told me everything. The real numbers were worse than anyone knew. Tyler had been hiding losses by misclassifying expenses. Client churn was up 17% quarter over quarter. The new customer service team wasn't logging issues correctly, which meant some support tickets had gone unresolved for weeks. And the worst part? The team knew. They all knew. They just couldn't say anything. Because any complaint got brushed off as resistance to innovation. And Dad, he barely showed up anymore. He let Tyler run the show while he played golf with Brielle's father and talked about legacy. I asked her one more question. Do you still have access to the old KPI dashboard? She smiled. Not directly, but I saved a backup. Just in case. I felt my heart skip. She pulled out a flash drive. I didn't ask why she brought it. She just knew. We left the cafe an hour later. I didn't tell her what I was planning. But before she got in her car, she looked at me and said, whatever you do, make it count. I went home, plugged in the drive. The data was gold. Every missed shipment, every delayed response, every financial discrepancy from the last 2 quarters. It wasn't illegal yet, but it was sloppy, amateur, and deeply embarrassing for a company trying to impress a multi-millionaire investor. I created a report. Clean, professional, charts, summaries, metrics. No attacks, just facts. I titled it, Operational Audit. Risk Factors in Q3, Q4 Implementation. Then I printed one copy. Found it. Black cover. White label. And waited. The engagement party was a week away. I wasn't going to crash it. But someone else was going to receive that report. Someone who mattered a whole lot more than my parents or Tyler. Charles Renner. And I knew exactly how to get it in his hands. But I'll tell you how I did it in a moment. Because this was the calm before the storm. I didn't show up to the engagement party. That wasn't the kind of revenge I wanted. Loud, dramatic, filled with gasps and champagne spills. I wasn't going to cause a scene or make a speech. This wasn't about attention. It was about consequence. And consequence, when done right, doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs timing. The morning of the party, I took the black-bound report I'd printed, Operational Audit, Risk Factors in Q3, Q4 Implementation, and walked into the front lobby of the Renner and Cole corporate office downtown. I wasn't dressed to impress. Just a navy button-down and jeans. Casual, clean, confident. The receptionist barely glanced up. Do you have an appointment? Nope, I said with a smile. But this is for Charles Renner. It's about his future investment in Winters Logistics. He'll want to read it before tonight's party. She started to say something, then hesitated when I set the report down on the counter. The label was sleek. Professional. My name was nowhere on the front. Just the words. Prepared for Charles Renner, private and confidential. I didn't wait for a response. I just nodded politely and walked out. I didn't know if Renner would actually read it, but I knew what kind of man he was, reputation conscious, surgically precise, and allergic to embarrassment. If someone handed him a report suggesting his future son-in-law was running a crumbling company built on lies, he'd at least glance at it. And that's all I needed. That night, I stayed home, made pasta, opened a bottle of wine. Abby texted me mid-evening. You didn't come. Didn't feel like celebrating. Something happened. I don't know what, but Renner left early. Dad looked like he'd swallowed a brick. You'll find out soon enough, I replied. And she would. They all would. Because the party wasn't the end. It was just the crack in the dam. 3 days later, I got the first confirmation. One of my old warehouse managers, Chris, messaged me on LinkedIn. Tyler's having a meltdown. You hear anything about an investor pulling out? I smiled at the screen for a second before typing. Nope. Just sounds like bad leadership. Turns out, Renner had read the report. All of it. According to Abby, who later gave me the full rundown over drinks, he didn't say a word to my parents at the party. Not one word. He smiled politely, made his rounds, posed for photos, and then slipped away before the cake. The next morning, he called a meeting with Tyler and my dad. Brought his legal team. No one knew what was said behind closed doors, but the fallout was immediate. The strategic partnership was canceled. The wedding was postponed indefinitely. And within the week, Brielle moved out of the condo my dad had leased for them. I would have felt bad if Tyler hadn't spent months stepping on everyone on his way up the ladder he never built. But it didn't stop there. Renner didn't just walk away, he talked. Quietly, of course. Discreetly. But the kinds of conversations billionaires have over golf or scotch in corner offices spread fast. And when someone like Renner expresses doubt about a company's integrity, people listen. That quarter, Winter's Logistics lost 4 more contracts. 3 of them were companies Renner had personal connections with. Within a month, the spiral began. Clients started pulling out. Vendors demanded tighter terms. Employees, the ones who'd been hanging on for stability, started jumping ship. Carla forwarded me a photo from the office parking lot. Empty. The loading dock, once buzzing with forklifts and trucks, was still as a graveyard. And Tyler? Well, Tyler did what Tyler always did when things got hard. He blamed everyone else. He blamed the staff for resisting innovation. He blamed Dad for not backing him strongly enough. He blamed the market, inflation, tech disruptions, and even, in an email that leaked to several ex-employees, me. Apparently, I had poisoned the well by spreading lies and manipulating vendors. The irony? I never said a single untrue thing. I just showed people what was already there. Eventually, Dad tried to regain control. He came back into the office full-time, tried to meet with clients personally, tried to smooth things over. But it was too late. His legacy had a name, and that name was Tyler. That name was now Mud. Abby told me our parents stopped mentioning me in conversation. Like I'd become a ghost. Not an enemy. Not a traitor. Just inconvenient. A reminder of the path not taken. But something else happened, too. People reached out. Former employees who'd left or been pushed out. Small business owners I'd helped when no one else did. Clients who remembered me fixing problems at midnight, driving across town to personally deliver a misrouted shipment, catching errors that could have cost them thousands. One day I got an email from an old client, a local electronics distributor, who said, "We never realized how much you were doing behind the scenes. Wish we'd told you that sooner." That one stayed with me, because that was all I ever wanted, really. Not power, not revenge, just recognition. And now, I had it. Not from the people who shared my blood, but from the ones who'd seen my worth long before I saw it myself. My consulting firm kept growing. Slowly, steadily. I brought Carla on part-time, then full-time. I hired 2 assistants. Started offering training programs. Wrote a short guidebook on logistics systems that started making the rounds in small business circles. And one morning, I got an email from a university. They wanted me to guest lecture for their operations management course. "Your story is unique," the professor wrote, "and your insights could help our students understand what leadership really looks like." I almost didn't respond. But then I remembered all those years I spent cleaning up behind someone else, pretending that was leadership. I smiled and wrote back. The last I heard of Tyler, he was trying to start a podcast. Something about next-gen entrepreneurship. I don't know if it ever launched. And honestly, I don't care. Because when he looks in the mirror, I hope he remembers that he had everything handed to him and lost it. And when my dad locks the doors to that warehouse for the last time, I hope he thinks back to the day he called me bitter. Because I wasn't bitter. I was done. And I walked out before the fire started. Now I'm building something they can't touch. And every time I sign a new client, train a young entrepreneur, or teach a class, I remember one thing. The door they pushed me out of was the same one I walked through to build a better life.